This is an inference question, which asks us what's gotta be true based only on the information we have in the passage. In the real world, I might think of an inference as an educated guess, but on the SAT it doesn't mean that. It means what is something that we know to be true based on what's in the passage. Another way to think of this would be, does this answer logically follow from the information, opinions, or evidence in the passage? Looking at the answer choices, is A something we know to be true? Based on our notes, paragraph 4 tells us that very tall buildings get skinnier as they get taller. That means that the top floors would have less floor area than the ground floor. A sounds correct, and we could probably move on at this point. But let's take a look at some of the other answers to make sure. Looking at B, you might think, I know that there were a lot of buildings that were torn down in New York, so that could be true. But the question is, does that follow from the passage? The passage doesn't mention anything about buildings being torn down really anywhere. So we can't say that B is something that we know to be true. So B is not a correct answer. Well, what about C? It says that every building built in New York City since 1916 features a stair-step construction. The passage doesn't say a lot about every building built since then. It basically only mentions the Equitable Building, the Chrysler Building, and the Empire State Building. So we can't really draw that conclusion based on the evidence the passage gives us. Now let's look at D. The passage doesn't mention any other buildings similar to the Equitable Building. What that means is that other similar buildings are not within the scope of what we can know based on this passage. So D can't be correct. So which question should we do next? Definitely the next question, because it's asking us about the question we just answered. This is a command of evidence question, but I like to think of it as the search for evidence. This is where we try as quickly as possible to find which of these pieces of evidence works for the question we just answered. One quick way I think about this is, how did I answer the last question? I looked at my summaries and noticed that paragraph 4 is the one that talked about the setbacks and how that changes the shapes of various buildings in New York. That clue means the first choice I'm looking for is the one that marks paragraph 4 as being the one that probably contains that evidence. As I look at these answer choices, I see that lines 49 through 51 are the only ones that fall within paragraph 4. Let's take a look at it to be sure. Okay, the sentence they are referencing specifically says that the floor area is decreased by certain amounts as the building gets taller. Bingo. Okay, let's go back to the detail question, number 1. This is an example of a detail question, one that asks you to look back and hunt for the details that help you answer these questions. These questions would normally take a really long time, but our notes can help us narrow our search down very quickly. So let's search for the answer. When did we start talking about that building code? Paragraph 3. So let's see if the answer choices match up with what was in that paragraph. I remember writing down first, but I can't remember what it was the first of. When I look back at the paragraph, I'm going to read more closely to pick up the details, since that's what we're looking for. I see that it wasn't the first to limit the height of buildings, but instead it was the first to limit the height because of the shadows. Other cities had laws that limited the height first. So that means A is incorrect. When I look at B, it says it was a close copy of laws in Washington and San Francisco. So now I look in paragraph 3 for where it starts talking about Washington and San Francisco. Even though I could just glide by the first time, now I'm going to read the sentence very closely to see exactly what it says. It says that those cities didn't have laws that addressed the shadows, so how could this law be a copy of those? So let's cross B off our list and move on to the next choice. We're in the same paragraph, but now I'm skimming for the part that talks about the Equitable Building. It says the Equitable Building added momentum to the movement to make these new laws. That does sound like it matches up with answer choice C. On test day, that would be enough to choose C and move on. But let's just see what answer choice D says. At a quick glance, it looks like it makes sense, But when you read the passage closely, the answer choices got the number switched around. It's 3 feet of height for every 1 foot of setback. That confirms our picking of answer choice C.